I was diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer. Just 1 year left to live. Suddenly, my everyday life was engulfed in darkness, as if it had been stolen away. The first thing that crossed my mind was whether I should tell my husband Thomas and my son Stephen about this harsh reality. I hesitated for a bit, but ultimately decided not to tell them. I didn't want them to see me getting weaker, and more than anything, knowing how challenging caregiving can be, I didn't want to put them through that. So then, what should I do? The answer to that came quickly as well. I would ask for a divorce without saying anything. Rather, no other options even came to mind. And so, without telling them anything, I began packing up my belongings. Then one day, out of the blue, "Carol, come here for a sec. We need to talk." Thomas called out to me. While I had no definite proof as to why, deep down I was almost certain. Of all things, had he noticed my illness? Across the table in the middle of the living room sat Thomas, wearing a grave expression. Sensing that the moment had finally come, my heart pounded so hard it felt like it would leap out of my mouth. "I'm only going to say this once, so listen up," Thomas began. I swallowed hard. "I don't want to be a caregiver. I saw how much pain you were in. So, I want a divorce." His unexpected words made me feel like everything was going dark before my eyes. "I understand. Then, I'll be the one to leave. Thank you for everything up until now." Rushing past Thomas, who looked like he still had more to say, I left the living room. Without even grabbing the bags I had prepared in advance, I ran out of the house. Outside, rain was pouring down. "Hey Carol, what's for dinner tonight?" My husband Thomas poked his head out from the garden to ask me this question, having just finished up his new gardening hobby. It was 3 p.m. A bit early to be thinking about the dinner menu. But then again, this was typical for him. "I haven't decided on anything yet," I replied. "Is that so?" Thomas responded. Thomas had always been selfish since he was young. His infidelity was not just a 1 or 2 time thing, and I had to handle most of the housework and childcare by myself. To top it all off, he got hooked on gambling, constantly betting on horse races and all sorts of other things, winning and losing over and over again. While he never went into debt, there were times when we came close to that kind of situation. Just dealing with that alone was incredibly tough. But then, around the time when raising Stephen started to settle down, my mother-in-law Linda had a stroke and became paralyzed on one side of her body. I was the only one taking care of Linda when she needed long-term care, but that burden was finally lifted when she passed away 2 years ago. As for Thomas, honestly, I'm not really sure what he was doing during that time. He went to work as usual, and whenever he had a little extra money, he probably went off somewhere to gamble. It's not like he never contributed any money at all. When he won at gambling, he would come home in high spirits and give me some money for cosmetics, a somewhat nice brand name watch, or living expenses. But the thing is, with gambling, you lose more often than you win. So there were times when it affected our household finances, and I would scold him when he came home after a big loss. Why do I put up with so much to be with him? Honestly, I don't know myself. After he reached retirement age, maybe he had a change of heart. He finally stopped cheating, and his gambling was reduced to just enjoying the occasional horse race. On the other hand, it was surprising that Thomas took an interest in gardening, but it's a far healthier and more wholesome hobby than gambling. Seeing that, I felt relieved deep down. And so, as we reached the second half of our lives, we were finally blessed with some peaceful days. Then one day, sometime after that, a loud yell suddenly rang out, shattering our tranquil daily life. "Oh, Carol! I hit it big!" The red ballpoint pen Thomas was holding clattered to the ground. What? What happened? His voice was so loud that I ended up yelling back. I got a $1,000 payout on the trifecta. Apparently, he had hit a huge jackpot. Certainly, his biggest wins until now had been around $300. But this time, it was a high-stakes payout of $1,000. Thomas was overjoyed like a child. I know, Carol. Let's go on a trip with this money. Huh? A few days later, as we were discussing it, he came home with a large sum of money in hand. It's not a very reassuring amount for retirement savings, but it's certainly not a small sum either. When was the last time we went on a trip, I wonder? When should we go? And where do you want to go anyway? Seeing him so uncharacteristically enthusiastic, I think back to how we used to be. It wasn't all good times, but they're still fond memories. When I really think about it, it's quite strange that I've stayed with Thomas this long. But even so, he's still undoubtedly my husband. There must be some kind of charm about him that I can't quite put into words. Anywhere is fine. I don't have any particular plans anyway. All right then, I'll decide for us. Saying that, he skillfully started operating his smartphone. I still haven't gotten used to it no matter how much time passes, and I can only use the bare minimum functions. But he has mastered it. Hey, how about we go overseas for a change? At our age, that's a bit much. I see. Then let's keep it domestic. It doesn't quite feel like him, but I don't have a bad feeling about it. The thought of being able to spend our time leisurely and peacefully like this from now on makes me a little happy. Since we have the opportunity, it might be good for us to talk about our future life together while on the trip. He's calmed down a bit too, so he probably won't suggest anything crazy. 1 week before the trip. While getting ready, I suddenly felt something off with my body. In that instant, an intense pain assaults me simultaneously from my abdomen and the opposite side of my back, as if being crushed. Almost at the same time, a black darkness rushes in from the edges of my vision. Before long, it filled into the center. When I open my eyes, I see the face of my son Stephen. Huh, Stephen? What are you doing here? What do you mean? What am I doing? Mom, you collapsed. According to him, I had apparently lost consciousness in the bedroom and was immediately carried to the hospital. Come to think of it, he had said he was coming home today. The thought of what might have happened if he hadn't been there is terrifying. It's noisy all around, with several nurses bustling about in addition to Stephen. It seems to be a grave situation of some kind. Is it my fault that things are in such a flurry? I ponder with my muddled mind. The answer is extremely hazy and doesn't come to me properly. Somehow managing to finish gathering my thoughts, a dull pain ran through my abdomen as if I had just remembered it. Unable to bear it, I press on my stomach. What's wrong? Are you okay? I'm fine. It just hurt a little. I try to put on a brave face so as not to worry Stephen, but pain is pain. If I do end up being diagnosed with something because of this, I want to keep it from Stephen. And of course, from Thomas too. I don't want to cause them any unnecessary worry because of me. I don't want to show them my weakening self either. Having them take care of me after how challenging it was is out of the question. With that single-minded determination, I somehow managed to stay conscious. After that, I underwent several examinations and was admitted to the hospital that day. I told him I was fine and sent him home to pack some things for me. I also left a message for Thomas, telling him to let him know it was just for testing and hospitalization. All I could do after that was pray that nothing was wrong. That night, a middle-aged male doctor in a white coat walked over to me and quietly sat down. Seeing his face, I instinctively sensed it was bad news. His expression was that gravely serious.
Miss Smith, please listen calmly.
That's the usual line, I thought to myself. My intuition turns into certainty.
Okay.
We found cancer. It's stage 3 pancreatic cancer. Removal of the cancer is impossible. This must be what they mean when they say everything went dark before their eyes. It must have gone dark like this right before I actually lost consciousness too, but it's completely different from this darkness now. The despair was on a whole other level.
I see. Cancer.
All the various noises that had been busily ringing until then were cut off, and I could barely make out the doctor's words. The reason for all the commotion seemed to lie with me after all. You have 1 year left to live. And then the crushing final blow, the pronouncement of my remaining lifespan. Amidst the silence of the surrounding sounds, the only thing I could hear clearly was the sound of something crumbling inside me. Collapsing like a tower of building blocks.
1 year.
It wasn't much to begin with, but all our plans for retirement have been ruined. No, in fact, retirement itself has vanished.
I can only imagine how you must feel.
What exactly can he imagine, I wonder? Amidst the swirling questions and confusion, my unwarranted anger is directed at the doctor. You could be admitted to the hospital right away, but I'm sure you have various things to take care of. Let's suppress the progression with medication for a while. After that, we can consider treatment options. But for now,
I understand.
That's all I could say in response. Later, Thomas and Stephen came to visit me at slightly different times. Hey, Carol! You all right? I'm fine. I just fell and got a little injured. You're making too big a deal out of it. I said that, but Stephen's gaze, knowing that it was different from the truth, was painful. After returning home once, a sigh escapes in front of the suitcase that was in the middle of being packed. The first thing that comes to mind is whether I should tell them about this reality. I agonized over it a little, but in the end, I chose not to tell them. In that case, what should I do? The answer to this also came to me immediately. Ask for a divorce without saying anything. Rather, this was the only thing I could think of. Once I've made up my mind, the packing that was left half-finished won't go to waste. And so, I decided to start sorting out my belongings without telling the two of them anything. Since the trip was postponed, most of the luggage is still as it was. Thomas was disappointed at first, but considering the circumstances, he kept it from showing on his face. Then one day, as I was switching to packing to secretly leave and working on it, Thomas appeared in the bedroom. Carol, come here for a bit. We need to talk. A sudden summons. While I have no definite proof as to the reason, deep down I have something close to certainty. Of all things, has he noticed my illness? Across the table in the center of the living room sat Thomas with a grave expression. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would leap out of my mouth at any moment. I'm only going to say this once, clearly. I swallowed hard. I don't want to be a caregiver. I saw how much pain you were in. So, I want a divorce. His unexpected words made me feel like everything was going dark before my eyes. Could it be that he heard it from Stephen? Or, I don't know how, but he saw through my illness and brought up divorce with caregiving as the reason, and I couldn't hide my agitation. I knew he had always been selfish, but I never thought it would be to this extent. At the same time, I realized that the decision I had made was not a mistake. Yes, that had been my intention from the beginning. In a sense, I even felt a sense of refreshment. I understand. Then I'll be the one to leave. Thank you for everything up until now. Brushing past Thomas, who looked like he still had more to say, I left the living room and ran out of the house. Outside, rain was pouring down. I had boldly run out, but after calming down a bit and thinking about it, I have nowhere to go. I left behind even the suitcase I should have prepared, and all I have with me is a smartphone that I can barely use properly. I even left my wallet behind. To make matters worse, the rain that was light when I came out has now turned into a downpour. I watched it from under the wisteria vines in the park. Well, what should I do? Going back now would be utterly disgraceful, but for example, to stay at a hotel or to be hospitalized as is, I absolutely need my wallet. Rarely getting so worked up, I was disappointed in myself for forgetting even such obvious things before running out. If I were to have another episode here. A park in the middle of the day on a weekday. Normally, children and their parents would be having fun, but in this heavy rain, the only thing lively is the sound of the rain, not the voices of children. Hardly anyone would pass by. My anxiety grows and swells against my will. To top it off, the roof is wisteria vines. Naturally full of gaps, the leaking is terrible. Dripping from the top of my head, my whole body gradually grows cold from the flowing droplets. It will surely have a negative impact on my illness too. But there's nothing I can do. The rain is still strong, and there's no sign of it letting up at all. I waited for a while without thinking about anything, but there are no passers-by. It seems my only option is to go back once after all. Just as I thought that, I was struck by another terrible stomach pain. Without a doubt, it's the same pain as before. My apprehension was not unfounded. I might lose consciousness again. No, if that's all that happens, it would still be better. I somehow reached for my smartphone, and that's when it happened.
There you are! Mom, what are you doing? In a place like this?
Amidst the heavy rain, Stephen's voice coming from afar kept me tethered to consciousness. Once again, I was saved by him.
I thought you'd left right away, but you don't even have an umbrella. I mean, listen properly to what Dad has to say, will you? Don't tell me you're feeling sick again. Wait there. I'll call an ambulance now.
When we arrived at the hospital, I was admitted immediately. It may be odd for me to say it myself, but it's only natural. And then, Thomas came to visit my hospital room, belatedly. I wondered if he hadn't wanted to nurse or care for me, but I remembered that Stephen had told me to listen properly to him at the park, so I stayed silent. Then, out of his mouth came words that were unexpected once again.
Why did you keep quiet about it until now? Since when?
Not understanding what he was saying, I inadvertently opened my mouth. You don't want to nurse or care for me, right? If you're divorcing me, why did you come?
Huh? I never said anything like that.
I suppressed the urge to get worked up. This isn't home, it's the hospital. I mustn't cause trouble for the other patients. No, you did say it. That you don't want to be a caregiver. It's convenient for me too, since I never intended to make you do it anyway.
Why are you saying now that I won't take care of Carol?
What incomprehensible things have you been saying? I don't want you to bother taking care of me, so please go home. That's why I'm asking, why did you keep quiet about that?
Both Thomas and I end up getting agitated. Even knowing it will cause trouble, I can't help but raise my voice. Even so, our conversation just isn't meshing at all. What is Thomas trying to say, I wonder? Then, as if unable to stand watching any longer, Stephen interjected.
Wait a minute. Listen, okay? Take turns saying what each of you is hiding. I'm not saying anything precisely because I know both sides. Have a proper talk, right here and now.
In the end, even he is saying strange things as well. With that, he left the room. I had no idea what was going on, but for now, I explained my current condition, lying in a hospital bed. Honestly and calmly, no matter what.
Stage 3 pancreatic cancer, huh? I see. What are you hiding? Well, I was told I have lung cancer too. 6 more months, 10 months at most, they said.
I couldn't believe it. If that's the case, what was the true meaning behind those words from a few hours ago?
Carol, you took care of my mother, didn't you? I couldn't do anything for you. That's why I didn't want to burden you anymore because of me. So, I said I didn't want to make you be a caregiver. I didn't know that even you had gotten cancer.
Hearing his confession, my emotions were in turmoil, but the first thing I thought was that his lack of communication was unbelievable. If he had properly explained the situation, we wouldn't have been having this conversation in the hospital room, at least.
Then you should say that more clearly. I'm sorry. I didn't want to tie you down at this age, Carol. That's why I was planning to go on one last trip and tell you everything then. I thought rather than having you take care of me, I wanted you to do more of what you like.
He pauses for a moment before continuing.
But to think that even you would get cancer. What are the chances of that?
In the end, we had been thinking the same thing. We had both hidden our illnesses and were just trying to gain the satisfaction of our own selfish self-sacrifice. I feel like I understand now why we were drawn to each other.
I was thinking the exact same thing. I'm sorry for keeping quiet. No, I'm the one who should apologize. I'm sorry for always causing you trouble. If it's all right with you, Carol, would you stay with me for just a little longer? I know I'm saying something selfish. But if we both have short lifespans, I want us to do what we want to do together.
In this situation, I couldn't find any particular reason to refuse. More than anything, I couldn't help but feel that this exchange was ridiculous, and I couldn't help but laugh.
What? I'm being serious here.
I know. That's exactly why it's funny, isn't it? To think we were both trying to do the same thing. Going overseas is definitely impossible, though.
I know. That was a joke. After all, at that time, I had already been given my terminal diagnosis.
Even though he had coincidentally won big on horse racing, it seems he had suggested going on a trip at that timing because he was thinking ahead after all. It made sense that it was unlike Thomas. From that rainy day onward, we each decided to receive palliative care, and while going to the hospital repeatedly, we continued living at home as we had been. The episodes aren't completely suppressed, but they're quite stable. And right now, we were in the middle of selecting a travel destination once again.
This city, or somewhere close to here, right?
While Thomas agonized beside me, I was looking for a hospice, not a travel destination. We had agreed that we both didn't want Stephen to have to take care of us, and decided to enter a hospice together. Once we return from the trip, we'll be admitted to the hospice together. A final trip, 1 night and 2 days. Visiting tourist spots and eating at delicious-looking restaurants, we talked about each other.
When I was young, I really caused you nothing but trouble. I'm sorry.
Not just when you were young. Even just recently, I almost caught a cold because of your lack of communication.
I'm sorry. And if we're talking about that, we're both guilty, aren't we? Trying to leave without a word. I knew how hard caregiving is, so I didn't want to make you do it. That's why I said we're both guilty. I didn't want to make you do that kind of thing twice either. But thanks to Stephen, we were able to talk and move things in a good direction.
Inevitably, the conversation gets more lively about the recent big events rather than the past. He had always been unfaithful, had a terrible gambling addiction, and was selfish. And when he suddenly brought up divorce that time, I thought his self-centeredness had finally reached its peak. However, our stories didn't match up, and we ended up troubling our son. If we don't reflect on this, what are we even reflecting on? I don't know about everything up until now, but at least at that time, he was thinking of me, even if he was lacking in his words. Just that made me a little happy after all.
So, I wanted to go on one last trip with you, Carol, but is there anything you want to do?
Thomas asked while eating his meal. He doesn't look at all like a terminal cancer patient. That aside, I seriously considered his question.
Horse racing.
Huh? I want to try horse racing.
1 week before entering the hospice, we went to a nearby racetrack. Unless something major happens, this will likely be our truly final outing together.
Are you really going to bet?
Yeah. I'm serious.
That being said, I wasn't particularly concerned about winning or losing. I simply wanted to experience gambling purely. On the other hand, I also wanted to know the reason why Thomas found it so interesting that he got hooked even when he lost.
Are you going to pick the horses yourself?
Thomas had his usual serious style, with a red ballpoint pen tucked behind his ear and a folded racing newspaper. Of course, he probably intends to win this time too.
Of course. If I pick a horse with a name I like, beginner's luck will make me win, right?
It's a commonly heard superstition.
Then pick as you like.
It wouldn't be interesting to bet a small amount at this point, so I chose a trifecta. I guess we might be similar in some ways, after all. The fanfare resounded, and the venue was greatly excited. Just being able to feel this excitement on my skin made me feel like it was worth coming.
No way, you've got to be kidding me.
The numbers and their order being announced sound familiar.
Let me see that for a sec.
I didn't even need to know the results anymore.
You actually won!
The payout was an unbelievable $2,000. Double the highest payout amount Thomas had ever won. And so, we enjoyed our brief remaining time and finally moved into the hospice. It's a nice place with attentive care and facilities. A much cleaner place than I had imagined, and I really took a liking to it. If Stephen hadn't come to pick me up on that rainy day, we probably would have passed each other by and wouldn't have been able to come here. In my case, I might not have even been alive in the first place. And now, I get to be with the person I love most, with whom I've shared joys and sorrows for decades. We were able to make our final memories too. It was the best possible end of life.
This is a nice place. I still can't relax, but I guess I'll get used to it eventually.
Thomas mutters to himself. Because I'm in the same position, I can understand the emotions packed into those words. How much longer will we be able to live, I wonder? I felt the exact same way. It's not hard to imagine that if we couldn't be together, we would have been crushed by anxiety. But now, that wasn't the case. If I believe the doctor's words, he will likely be the first to face his final moments. But that doesn't mean I can let my guard down. I don't even need to think about what would happen if I left him alone. I have to live with all my might so that I don't end up leaving him behind, unreliable as he is. Thomas's self-centeredness is probably more incurable than cancer, so he'll surely be the one to leave me behind. I'd prefer if he could live longer than me, but even so, I don't mind. I'm used to his selfishness, after all. And then, that morning arrived. From the day he was given 10 months to live, Thomas fought and endured cancer for a whole year. Unlike that day, the sky is so clear it feels refreshing. With this weather, he surely won't get lost on his way to his destination.
Carol, I'm sorry for always causing you trouble.
Lying in the hospital bed, Thomas had become thin and frail over the past year. Honestly, it was a sight I could hardly bear to see.
What are you saying at this point? We already finished talking about that, didn't we?
I see. Thank you.
No, I really thank you.
When I try to hold back my tears, my chest starts to hurt instead. When I realize that this is truly goodbye, I'm overwhelmed by a surge of emotions. But I'll be joining him soon too. Thinking that, my chest feels a little lighter. Because we'll surely meet again soon.
Dad, you did well. Rest in peace. Good night. I'll be joining you soon too, okay?
As Stephen and I, along with the doctors and caregivers, watched over him, the starting fanfare resounded.
Use common sense. She's a fake mom.
I was at a loss for words. Why did I have to be subjected to such harsh words? My husband William's son, Joseph, had recently been accepted into a prestigious medical school. I had decided to cover the enrollment fee and had just returned from the bank. Upon returning, I tried on the suit I had prepared for the entrance ceremony to show them, and that's when it happened. Their reactions were dismissive. William frowned, and Joseph clearly looked displeased. I couldn't understand why. Being called a fake, I felt as if thorns were deeply embedded in me. That's right.
The fake mom shouldn't come to the entrance ceremony.
In my despair, I couldn't retort. Who could have predicted that the family I decided to love would betray me so easily? It's not something that can be summed up with just sad. Since then, every day seemed to fade in color. On the day of the entrance ceremony, I didn't go and left the suit in my room as I went out. At that moment, my mobile phone started ringing. It was William.
Hey, what's this all about? You liar!
He shouted at me. The truth, which I myself was unaware of, was soon to be revealed by the person next to me. My name is Patricia. I am 51 years old and single. All my friends are married, and some even have children who are now 18. Lately, as they finished raising their children, I started going to cafes more often with my friends who now had free time. Listening to their stories, I found them endearing or tough at times. But everyone doesn't seem much different. Walking back from the cafe, I muttered and pondered alone. If I had a husband and children, how would I be spending my time now? Would I be reflecting on the tough and happy moments of parenting, just like my friends? However, I don't dwell on it too much, even though I'm not married. What I think about now are my deceased parents. My dad had been ill since he was young. Even when treatment was tough, he always smiled kindly, like the sun. Even when he became bedridden, he continued his hobby of reading and sometimes gave me book recommendations. My dad passed away when I was 30, and I cried with my mom. After losing my dad, I became lethargic and shocked for a while. It seems my mom felt the same. After my dad's death, she suddenly became very forgetful, and the house became a mess. Mom should have been tidy, but something was off. Thinking this, I persuaded her to go to the hospital, where we were told she was starting to show signs of dementia. Living alone, I immediately moved back to my parents' home to take care of Mom. From then on, I spent my days facing Mom and her dementia. Mom would start looking for the trash I had thrown away. Even though no one had visited, she would repeatedly open the front door, saying someone had come. At times, she would even become sad over the death of a cat we never owned. Mom and I spent a tumultuous 20 years, not knowing what was what. And just recently, Mom passed away. In the midst of my loss, I finished the funeral and started to sort through her belongings. It wasn't something that could be finished in a day or two, so I proceeded little by little, taking breaks. Opening a window, I looked up at the sky. The clear winter sky was mixed with the breeze of spring. It had been a while since I felt the flow of the seasons.
Maybe I've been too tense up until now.
Taking a deep breath, I stood in the kitchen to make some coffee. At that moment, the doorbell rang. It was a resident of the apartment and a friend of Mom's. Before my parents passed away, I had inherited an old apartment and had been the owner since my 30s. Because of this, I was close with the residents. They were all friendly, nice people who would share fruits and vegetables with me. The apartment was about a 10-minute walk from my parents' home. The fact that she had come all the way here meant there might have been some trouble. Feeling slightly anxious, I went out to see, but that wasn't the case. She had heard about Mom's passing and came to check on me, worried. She was about the same age as Mom and had been very close to her. I answered with a forced smile.
I'm okay. I knew this day would come eventually. But you seem to have been down lately. I'm really okay.
I was also taken care of by your mom. Yes, I know.
Her eyes were swollen from crying, truly mourning. We reminisced and promised to visit the grave together sometime. If there were people who cherished her like this, Mom would have been happy. Suddenly, I remembered something. The apartment nearby has to be demolished. A city development project was decided, and the area where the apartment now stands is to be turned into a road.
That's 5 years from now.
While drinking coffee, I absent-mindedly stared at the calendar on the table. Within these 5 years, I need to have the residents relocate and find a demolition contractor. A part of the cost will be covered by the city if I apply. Still, the idea of demolishing it is somewhat reluctant. To outsiders, it may seem like an old apartment, but it holds sentimental value for me. Frozen water pipes, clogged toilets, noise complaints. Looking back, there were many difficulties. There were issues I couldn't solve alone, but with my parents' help or by consulting professionals, we somehow managed. Spending days looking at paint samples for the exterior walls is also a fond memory.
It's a shame, but it has to be demolished.
The residents need time to find a new place to live. I'll make a notice soon. Losing Mom and having to let go of that apartment was incredibly sad. To distract myself from those feelings, I quickly finished my coffee. Then, without spending too much time on sorting through her belongings, I began to create the notice. The apartment residents came to visit me almost every day. Everyone was worried about me. Those who had known me longer would reminisce about memories with Mom. Of course, even those who hadn't known us as long would start conversations. Lately, I've been talking a lot with William Miller, who moved in about a year ago. He chose this apartment because the rent was cheaper than the surrounding market rates. He lives with his son, Joseph, and mentioned how education costs a lot of money.
It must have been hard.
Well, it can't be helped. Mom is probably laughing in heaven now.
You're strong. I lost my wife a few years ago, and it was hard to recover.
Oh, was that so?
Yes, she was ill, with a troublesome, incurable disease.
Was she hospitalized?
She wasn't, but I took care of her at home.
It must have been difficult with Joseph around.
Taking care of my wife while cooking and attending school events for him was hard.
His smiling face didn't show any of the hardships. Maybe that's part of his charm. Moreover, he always entertained me with his interesting stories. Talking with William made the sadness of losing Mom and having to demolish the apartment seem to disappear. Gradually, I realized I was becoming attracted to him. Even when shopping, I found myself wondering what William's favorite dishes were.
Oh, what am I thinking?
I made a gesture of brushing something away from my face, trying not to think about it any further.
I'm in my 50s. I should be focusing on being responsible, not on romance.
That's what I told myself. However, whenever I saw William, we would have fun talking again, and my resolve would waver. Before long, William and I had become closer than before. One sunny day, William came to me with a serious look. He said he had something to talk about, so I decided to stay home that day to listen. Maybe he had come to talk about moving out soon after seeing the notice. As we sat facing each other, nervously, he began. Actually, the thing is.
What's wrong? You're so formal all of a sudden.
Well, I've liked you for a long time now. Slowly, he took out a small case from his pocket. As he opened the lid, he said to me, "Will you marry me?" Inside was a very elegant ring shining brightly.
Me? Are you sure?
I was so surprised I had to do a double take. I thought it might be a mistake or a joke, but it seemed not. William leaned in and said, "Patricia, you're so calm, yet you look so happy when we talk. I want to be with you for the rest of my life."
But I'm already 51.
Age doesn't matter. I don't choose people based on something like that.
William said to me with a serious look. Marriage is about life. I want you to be the person who lives and shares that life with me. William. But maybe it's not okay because I have a child.
That's not true. I like you, William.
So, I accepted his proposal and we decided to get married. That night, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling, I never dreamed something like this would happen at this point in my life. Life is full of surprises. While looking at my sagging arms, I wondered if I could even wear a wedding dress. For a few days, that thought consumed me until William came with good news. Joseph had been accepted into a prestigious medical school.
Oh, congratulations.
Really, it's such a relief. He was so nervous during the exams, now we can finally relax.
Should we celebrate? Maybe order some food?
Well, there's a bit of a problem.
What is it?
Actually, even though he got accepted, we can't afford the enrollment fee and tuition. Medical school is quite expensive.
That's terrible.
We need to figure out the enrollment fee by the deadline at least. Seeing him so genuinely troubled made me worry too. Without a solution, Joseph couldn't enroll in medical school. If only I had been more responsible. William clenched his fist, frustration seeping through. Joseph has been saying since Mom got sick that he's going to cure her. That's why he aimed for medical school. I didn't know how much it would cost to attend medical school. I couldn't cover the full amount, but maybe I could manage the enrollment fee.
Actually, I can cover the enrollment fee.
Really?
His expression brightened instantly.
Yes. After all, we're family now, aren't we?
Thank you. Thank you. This way, Joseph can become a great doctor.
Please don't cry so much. Let's support Joseph together.
Later, I asked for the exact amount of the enrollment fee and started arranging the transfer. Actually, I was receiving a displacement allowance from the city for demolishing the apartment. I checked my balance and told William and Joseph that the enrollment fee seemed manageable.
That's great. Thank you, Patricia. No, Mom.
I'm so relieved.
All right, enough of that. Let's start our celebration dinner. Congratulations on your acceptance, Joseph. This looks delicious. Let's eat.
As they joyfully ate, saying how delicious it was, I felt like I was looking at my own son, which made me incredibly happy. Thinking about starting a new life with these two wonderful people made me feel much more positive. I felt motivated to do my best for this new family. The next day, after confirming the details of the destination account, I went to the bank. There were few customers that day, and I was called almost immediately after taking a number. As I approached the counter, I made eye contact and exchanged a light greeting with someone in the back. It was Mr. Davis, the branch manager. He stopped what he was doing and came over to me when he noticed me. It's been a while. How have you been since we last spoke?
Fine, thank you. I've received a lot of help from you before.
I had received assistance from Mr. Davis regarding the apartment and other assets. We've had a long relationship, spanning about 20 years. When Mom passed away, he was very supportive, something I vividly remember. Mr. Davis was highly regarded by my dad as a smart and dependable person.
What brings you in today?
I showed him my bank account and the details of the destination for the transfer.
Actually, I've recently decided to get married. I'm here to transfer enrollment fees for my stepchild.
Oh, that's wonderful news.
At least, that's what I expected him to say, but he didn't. Instead, he looked slightly troubled, glancing between the transfer details and me.
May I have a word with you about this?
Both the teller and I, puzzled, followed Mr. Davis. We were led to a small room at the back of the bank, the same place we'd discussed inheritance matters before. Mr. Davis, looking at the transfer details, asked me, "This is for medical school, correct?"
The son aims to become a doctor? Yes, that's what I've been told.
Excuse me, but could you tell me how you came to marry your husband?
Excuse me?
Caught off guard, I nevertheless decided to be frank. I talked about how, after losing Mom, I became closer to William, a resident of the apartment I managed. About how William had cared for his terminally ill wife while raising his son alone. And that his wife had passed away a few years ago, leaving him living with his son. That he proposed because he wanted to spend his life with me. And then, right after that, the issue of Joseph's enrollment fees came up.
I felt like I could really make an effort for our new family.
That's truly wonderful. But this William person...
Oh, my husband's name is William Miller.
William Miller?
He repeated the name softly, then tapped his fingers on the desk as if pondering. After a few seconds, he stopped tapping and said, "May I handle this matter?"
But...
Please, leave it to me.
He stood up with a smile. Then, opening the door.
Please.
He ushered me out. I left the bank, still confused about what had just transpired. On my way home, I thought about Mr. Davis. He had looked a bit troubled when he heard William's name.
Why, I wonder.
But I trust him. He's always been dependable, and there's never been a time he hasn't come through when he said he'd handle something. There's still time before the deadline, so it should be fine. I decided to leave everything in Mr. Davis's hands. That night, I tried on the suit I had prepared for the entrance ceremony in front of William and his son. It was a beautiful white suit.
How do I look, you too?
However, their response was cold.
Did you buy that?
Are you really coming to the entrance ceremony? William frowned, and Joseph clearly looked displeased. I didn't understand why.
Is it not okay?
It's not about being okay. Think about it logically. You're a fake mom. My heart skipped a beat. Being called a fake, I felt as if thorns were deeply embedded in me.
That's right, Patricia. A fake mom shouldn't come to the entrance ceremony.
Fake ones shouldn't come to the entrance ceremony.
I was speechless. Why did I have to be subjected to such harsh words? As I was about to lose consciousness, William sighed deeply. Let's just tell the truth.
The truth?
What do you think was the reason we were nice to you?
It's for the money. For my enrollment fee and tuition. I can't believe it.
You have no other merits to marry someone like you.
What do you mean? Was it all an act?
Yes, it was. It took a long time to get close to you, a heartbroken person, and secure a marriage. I would have preferred a younger and more beautiful mom. We thought, being the owner of the apartment and having inherited a lot from your parents, you had plenty of assets.
Would have been nice if you paid for the whole tuition too. Disappointing. Can't believe you only paid the enrollment fee.
There has to be a limit.
So, it's over. No more pretending to be a family.
We'll stop being nice.
They laughed loudly. Not understanding what was so funny, I stood there, stunned. In my despair, I couldn't retort. This white suit now seemed like a symbol of my solitary excitement. Who could have predicted such an easy betrayal by the family I decided to love? It's not something that can be summed up with just sad. Their laughter echoed in my ears, and I covered them to block out the sound. From that day on, I was continually ignored by them, even though I was right there. It was as if I didn't exist. Such experiences had worn me down. Thinking about the future filled my nights with anxiety and sleeplessness, making it hard to find rest. Days passed in a blur of sleep deprivation until the day of the entrance ceremony arrived. That day, I didn't go to the ceremony and left the suit in my room as I went out. Wandering the streets, I regretted my naive actions. Why did I believe their words so blindly? It was my fault for not doubting them. How should I deal with those two from now on? That's all I could think about. Then, suddenly, I felt someone tap my shoulder and call my name. Turning around, there was Mr. Davis, smiling.
I saw you just now. What's wrong?
I couldn't possibly tell him I was deceived by my spouse and his son. I awkwardly looked away. Just then, my mobile phone started ringing. It was William.
Excuse me, I need to take this call.
I excused myself to Mr. Davis and pressed the answer button. William shouted at me.
What the hell is this? You liar. What? At the entrance ceremony registration, they said my enrollment has been canceled because the $20,000 enrollment fee hasn't been paid. That's ridiculous. Explain this.
He was ranting over the phone. Indeed, that day I went to the bank and left this matter in Mr. Davis's hands. As I was puzzled, Mr. Davis next to me offered his help.
Let me explain.
He took my mobile phone, switched it to speaker, and started talking.
Hello, William Miller. I'm Davis, a banker from around here. What? You were involved in a scandal in another town before, weren't you? Accused of embezzling company funds.
Mr. Davis spoke plainly and clearly.
What are you talking about?
You fled here from your hometown. I was quite surprised.
Hey, don't talk nonsense about Dad.
It would have been better if it were nonsense, but it was a big scandal back then, and I remember it well.
Stop it!
After all, it was an embezzlement case that even involved our bank due to our business dealings with that company. It's hard to forget. Mr. Davis's smile vanished, replaced by a stern expression as he recalled the past. I remembered your name. When Patricia mentioned your name, I was suspicious.
What? Patricia, what did you tell him?
I heard you got married. Admirable how quickly you moved on after getting divorced.
Divorced? You said she died. Was that a lie too?
It wasn't a terminal illness, and the death was a lie. You were served divorce papers because of that scandal.
Shut up. Just send the enrollment fee.
You approached kind Patricia, pretending to be a struggling single father, planning to get money out of her, didn't you?
Shut up. It's none of your business. Hey, Patricia. Don't believe a word he says. It's all lies. No. The lies are all yours.
The day I went to the bank, I realized I had forgotten something on my way home and had to return. That's when I met Mr. Davis again. He mentioned he had some concerns about William and asked if we could delay the transfer a bit. Believing Mr. Davis, since there was still time until the payment deadline, I left the money in my bank account. I had told them I went to the bank, which led them to mistakenly believe I had made the transfer. I never said I had sent the money. That night, after showing them the suit, I discovered their true nature and intentions. It was then I understood why Mr. Davis wanted to wait before making the transfer. Today, I was on my way to the bank to clarify everything. I hadn't expected to run into him in the middle of the street, but hearing everything confirmed my suspicions.
I kept asking William and Joseph to talk to me. What's with the suddenness? But they both ignored me, unaware that I hadn't made the transfer.
William and Joseph were silent on the other end of the phone. Confronted with the truth by both Mr. Davis and me, they were rendered speechless. A few seconds later, the call ended and only ambient noise filled the air. After that day, the divorce between William and me was swiftly finalized. With everything exposed and his understanding of my financial status, William probably decided it was time to cut his losses. I never expected the smiling facade he presented to be just that, a facade. He and Joseph fled, leaving not just my apartment but also the town. Joseph's behavior had been problematic, often causing trouble at school. Though his academic performance was good, which is probably why his teachers overlooked his issues. Looking at their vacated room, I reflected on such rumors. Can such things really happen? It felt like something out of a drama or manga, with stories too bizarre to discern as truth or fiction. Yet, there was the undeniable fact of his capability to get accepted into a prestigious medical school. I regretted that such intellect couldn't have been applied more constructively. I've had enough of marriage. Years later, my apartment was to be rebuilt nearby, just a few minutes' walk from its original location. On the day I posted the notice about the apartment, I also went to the municipal office to discuss the displacement fee. That's when an error was discovered in the construction blueprints for the development project. The development area was reviewed, and it turned out that only a slight adjustment to the apartment's location was necessary. Both I and the residents were surprised and pleased by this turn of events. Though the reconstruction took time, it was completed sooner than expected. Taking this opportunity, the plumbing and other facilities were completely updated. However, I wondered if the residents would choose to stay. As I observed, it seemed they were willing to remain.
Sorry to trouble you a bit longer.
A friend of Mom's, who had made plans with me to visit her grave in remembrance, said this with a smile. Now, we visit the grave together once or twice a year and have meals together, enjoying a close relationship. Everyone moved to the new apartment smoothly, and the relocation proceeded without issues. The development also progressed, changing not just the apartment but the surrounding ambience. The creation of new roads was welcomed by delivery personnel for easier access. Going to the nearby supermarket became more convenient with the wider roads. The atmosphere seemed to brighten a bit. Exchanging greetings with the apartment residents remained unchanged. Everyone was still friendly and pleasant. Life is unpredictable, isn't it? My quiet murmur dissolved into the clear blue sky.
You're the famous photographer. Are you shooting today?
The woman in front of me is staring at me excitedly. We met on the beach during clamming season, and she seems to know that I'm a photographer. Despite her family of 3 playing in the sand, she listens intently to what I have to say. It's a poignant reminder of my early days as a rookie, when people didn't believe I was a photographer and I barely got any assignments. When I tell her that I'm here for a photo shoot, she eagerly volunteers to be the subject. But could you please not show my child's face? She says this, pointing to a cute little girl. The girl, about 2 or 3 years old, looks at us with her big, adorable eyes wide open. Of course. And what about Dad? When I ask, the father looks pale, glancing around uncertainly and giving vague replies. I guess that's understandable. After all, the dad building a sandcastle with the girl is my husband. My name is Katie. I'm a 30-year-old freelance photographer. For work, I'm often called to school events and weddings in the neighborhood. I capture moments of smiles and friendship, sharing them through my photos. It's not just about taking pictures, but about capturing people's memories and emotions, sharing their happiness. Capturing these joyous moments in people's lives is my job and my passion. But my life's shutter stopped in an instant due to a certain event. My husband, Galton, was a busy businessman. He was involved in the development of leisure facilities and tourist destinations, traveling all over the country. We couldn't spend much time together because of our busy schedules, but the time we did have was special. Even if it was just a little while, the time and smiles with him were what kept me going. I had no intention of quitting my photography. We'll build our careers while supporting each other. We promised and got married. That's when I started looking for ways to work from home instead of being out and about for shoots. First, I posted landscape and permitted portraits on social media as part of my portfolio. By showcasing my work in virtual galleries like online photo exhibitions, not only publishers and peers in photography noticed me, but also a wider general audience. This led to a rapid increase in followers. Thanks to social media, I was able to do live streams, talking about my photography and even making some money from it. I would share my photos while explaining the stories and techniques behind them. Communicating through photography was fun and fulfilling. I balanced outdoor shooting with my social media presence, steadily growing my follower base. Galton was still constantly on business trips. Inevitably, I spent a lot of time with my in-laws, who thankfully took an interest in my social media activities. As I taught them how to use smartphones and social media, we grew closer, and they often tuned into my photos and live streams. Both are wonderful people, and even when Galton was away, I didn't feel lonely and enjoyed fulfilling days. However, there was a significant void in our lives. We couldn't have children. Despite numerous tests, we were unable to conceive. We both wanted kids, so years into our marriage without a child put a strain on us. Initially supportive, Galton grew tired of the financial burden and frequent clinic visits, and I could feel us drifting apart. His involvement in a major project requiring constant travel didn't help. His interest shifted from our elusive treatment to his challenging work. He cared less about our childlessness, talking more about work instead. I tried to understand his busyness, but we were emotionally distant.
Yesterday, I had a meeting with a client, and it looks like a new project is starting. I'll be away overnight for a while starting next week.
As he unpacked dirty shirts from his large suitcase, Galton told me this. He had just gotten back, but I quickly started the laundry. Galton wouldn't bother to clean or buy new shirts otherwise.
It's faster and less risky this way,
he would say, but I wanted to save where I could.
So, about the hospital.
That's impossible.
You know I have to be there in person, right?
I can't leave work, so let's skip it next week. I sighed quietly, so Galton wouldn't hear. I had made an appointment, but there was nothing I could do if he was traveling. Galton's actions caused trouble for his company, and it was painful to see the work he was once praised for being overshadowed by his personal life. I never wanted to be a hindrance.
But, you know, as busy as I am, it's tough. Katie, you go out for shoots too, right? Let's both keep up the good work. Yeah. Take care of yourself, Galton.
I swallowed my words as he casually dismissed the topic. Maybe Galton no longer wanted children. But I was too afraid to ask. Should I accept this silently, or should I bring it up, even indirectly? The uncertainty was unsettling. I was adept at capturing people's joy and sorrow through my camera. Yet now, I was living each day unaware of my own emotions. Slowly, I felt trapped within the frame of my own photographs. One day, a fine white envelope with the logo of a famous resort company arrived at the house. It didn't seem like just any direct mail, so I hastily opened it. Inside was a voucher for a stay at a luxury hotel by the sea. Apparently for 3 people. Why was this sent to me? Feeling a stir in my heart, I quickly went to Galton.
Galton, this arrived. Do you know anything about it?
Of course, I wasn't accusing him of anything. I was careful not to sound mean, just asking naturally. Galton stopped reading his newspaper and looked at me. His expression was blank, but his gaze hardened slightly, almost glaring. I had never been looked at that way before and couldn't hide the sinking feeling in my chest.
That's for a colleague whose plans didn't work out, so it was sent to us. It's nothing strange, so can I have it back?
He reached out his hand. Without saying a word, I handed him the envelope with the tickets, and he snatched it away. But when he saw the address, he looked back at me with clear annoyance.
This is addressed to me. Don't open my stuff without asking.
I was surprised and hurriedly apologized. However, it wasn't unusual for direct mail to come to my busy salesman husband. We usually disposed of the ones that arrived at home, so I was taken aback by his reaction.
Sorry, I didn't realize it was direct mail. I was just checking.
You should have asked me since I'm here today.
Galton took the envelope to his room, and I couldn't ask any more about the tickets. Although I didn't fully understand why he needed to get tickets for a colleague, I had to accept his explanation. But then, half a month later, something else happened. In July, just before Independence Day, and when we had a memorial service planned at my in-laws,
I've got a long business trip,
he suddenly said. I was initially speechless.
A business trip?
In my work, I often get requests from families or for landscape photography. But I had taken time off for the memorial service. Freelancers and even regular companies usually have Independence Day off. And so did Galton's company, at least in the past. Galton shrugged slightly and forced a smile. It just came up suddenly. I have to work without a break.
So, can you attend the memorial service for me?
I knew he took pride in his work and had been serious about his career even before our marriage. But increasingly, I found myself doubting the reasons for his work and trips. In the end, he left for work, pulling his favorite suitcase. The news reached my in-laws just in time, and while they were angry at his attitude, they made sure I didn't feel uncomfortable.
We're sorry you cleared your schedule for this. When I see Galton next, I'll give him a stern talking to,
said my MIL, Helen. All I could do was give a vague smile. I was supposed to stay a few days after the service. Galton was their only child, and they didn't want me to leave too soon, so I ended up staying as originally planned. I brought my camera and took pictures of my in-laws doing housework, living their daily life, and even landscapes I don't usually focus on. I occupied my time with shooting plans, but part of me felt the absence of Galton, who should have been there. I decided to go to the beach one station away, both for work and a change of scenery. During the spring and summer holidays, the beach is lively with clam digging, and ideal family groups enjoy their time on the sands. Some people are under colorful beach umbrellas, enjoying walks and sunbathing. I walked along the beach with my camera. Suddenly, I stopped at the sound of a familiar voice, coming from a family building a sandcastle. I was glad I wasn't holding my camera. I would have dropped it at the sight. In the circle was Galton. He was with a young woman and a toddler, building a sandcastle together. They looked like a happy family, gathering white sand and shells. I couldn't believe my eyes. But the hotel voucher that had arrived at home, Galton's frequent long business trips, his indifference, it all piled up like sand before me. It would have been an ideal family scene for a photo assignment. But I couldn't believe my husband was there. The child between them looked about 2 or 3 years old. About the time I started feeling Galton drifting away. He had another family. Though I wasn't sure if the child was his, my instincts as a wife told me there was a blood connection. I felt as if a glass frame inside me had shattered mercilessly. The frame was supposed to hold our happy, smiling faces as a couple. I steeled myself and approached. Not Galton, but the woman. She was wearing a large straw hat and looked surprised when I suddenly spoke to her. I forced a smile and apologized for the abrupt approach. Then, I handed her my business card, explaining that I was a freelance photographer. The card only had my professional name, but it also included my social media contact. She looked at the card with interest, then started searching for me on her mobile phone. In the background, Galton, clearly aware of me, was frozen, staring at a spot on the beach.
Would you mind if I take a photo of your family? I sometimes do live streams showing photography tips.
What? I know Katie. I follow you. You post mobile photography tips, right?
She was excited, not knowing my relation to Galton, happy to be approached by a minor celebrity on social media. I was surprised she was a follower, but she was eager, even for a live stream. I hesitantly asked, and before I could finish,
"Of course."
She was already excitedly agreeing. I felt guilty, like I was deceiving her, but my goal was to document Galton's other family.
"Please teach me some photography tips for moms." "Galton, you're okay with it, right?"
Galton was caught off guard. Stammering, he tried to avoid looking at me, desperately thinking of an excuse.
We shouldn't, because of the face reveal. I'm a model for brochures, Can you just make sure my child isn't in the frame?
It turned out the other woman, Lisa, was a model I had met through my husband's company's public relations work. Of course, I agreed and adjusted my phone camera to keep the child out of the shot. I quickly set up for a live stream, pretending to teach the mother, with Galton unavoidably in the center of the frame. His forced smile was interpreted positively by viewers, quickly spreading as cute nervous dad. After the stream, I thanked them and left. But within minutes, Galton caught up with me, leaving Lisa and the child behind. I asked him bluntly,
"What are you trying to do?"
He remained silent, looking annoyed. He probably felt awkward with Lisa and came to me as an escape. I wonder what his intentions were in stopping me. Finally, he spoke heavily.
"Katie, understand me.
What's there to understand without a proper explanation? It's clear enough if you look."
Look, I couldn't help it. I had a child with her before I could with you.
It's fine.
Lisa's family is wealthy. She doesn't need me to marry her.
Galton confessed, his defiance revealing the truth. It seemed unlikely that a young woman who got pregnant would say something so convenient. Probably, Lisa suspected he was married.
I wanted a child. But you couldn't have one. Lisa is nice, and the kid is cute, like her. But it doesn't mean I hate you or don't want to live with you.
His contradictory words left me holding my aching head. Apparently, he wanted to maintain the status quo.
I won't bother you. This situation is perfect for me.
Isn't this good enough? How could it be? I should have argued back. But I was so overwhelmed I lost my voice. In my silence, he sighed in victory and was about to leave. But someone unexpected arrived. It was my in-laws.
Galton. Who are that woman and child?
My Fael, Nathan, red-faced, confronted him. Galton flinched at their sudden appearance.
Why? We saw the live stream notification. Who's the woman and child if you were on a business trip? Skipping a visit home for some unknown woman and a child.
Without waiting for Nathan, Helen stepped in to defend me, showering Galton with fierce words. I was shocked. They had seen the live stream and realized something was wrong. They were stunned to see Galton as a husband with an unfamiliar woman and had rushed over. Confronted by his parents, Galton had to confess everything about Lisa and the child.
Ungrateful child.
He received a strong slap from Helen. Nathan glared at Galton with a look so fierce, I thought he might have punched him if Helen hadn't acted first. My in-laws left Galton behind and came to take me away. Following their apologies and strong encouragement, I decided to divorce. After uncovering evidence of Galton's affair with Lisa, his mistress, the matter was initially settled with a compensation agreement. However, as the divorce proceedings and investigations progressed, various facts came to light. Firstly, it was revealed that Lisa indeed knew Galton was married. Considering she agreed to continue the relationship despite being pregnant, it seemed she had prepared herself for being involved with a married man. Her motivation wasn't just financial, she likely wanted to keep Galton as long as possible. However, she genuinely didn't know that I was his wife and, upon realizing she was following me, blocked all my social media accounts. She angrily started posting on various forums, but this only resulted in more sympathy for me, as she publicly exposed herself as the mistress. It caused trouble in her own family, leading to her being nearly kicked out of her home. Desperately, she even tried to move into my former in-laws' house after I left. But they firmly refused her entry. Next, Galton's secrets began to unravel. During the compensation claim investigations, numerous women and men associated with him came to light. It turned out he had multiple affairs during his business trips, involving repeated liaisons with several women, some of whom were engaged or married. I decided to send out the data from that live stream. A little investigation would reveal that I, his lawful wife, was broadcasting, and the people in the frame were his mistress and their child. As a result, women deceived into thinking he was single, and husbands who felt their wives were stolen, were inflamed with anger and confronted Galton. He found himself facing lawsuits from every direction, with no choice but to accept them all. As more revelations about Galton emerged, Lisa, to everyone's surprise, fled with their child. Clearly out of love, she chose to escape her relationship with him. Lisa's social media uproar eventually settled down, and as her accounts disappeared, I decided to let her go. But considering her nature of boasting about affairs on social media, it was unlikely she would just vanish. True to form, Lisa started using an entirely different account. However, her posts playing the tragic heroine were quickly identified, attracting a wave of criticism. She would delete her account when things got tough, only to reappear under a new one, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Abandoned even by Lisa, Galton's last resort was to turn to his in-laws, but they were enraged upon learning of his multiple affairs. Without any apologies and simply pleading for help, his parents decided to sever ties with their son. Following the scandal, Galton was burdened with substantial compensation payments. As the legal proceedings progressed, inquiries from his mistresses and their husbands flooded his company, complicating the situation even further. Moreover, this wasn't the worst outcome. The unprecedented scandal of his affair and child being exposed on social media was disastrous. The fact that the reveal happened during a business trip made the information spread rapidly, and the company's facilities and reviews were flooded with shocked and angry comments. The fallout from the scandal spread internally and externally, diminishing the company's trust. The executives, feeling a crisis, hastily strategized communication plans, consulting with experts due to their lack of experience in handling such situations. Meanwhile, they strictly instructed employees to provide accurate information to quell the chaos. Inquiries and condemnations from inside and outside the company poured in, and Galton's reputation plummeted. He became an outcast at work, completely isolated. Amidst the uncomfortable atmosphere, he was soon asked to resign and had to look for a new job. Originally proficient and successful in sales, he was favored by an older demographic who didn't use social media and quickly found new employment. However, his nature didn't change. Within half a year, he was involved in new scandals, such as pursuing his manager's wife and attempting to charge a shabby motel stay as a business expense. He was fired, joined new companies, and was repeatedly dismissed for causing turmoil in personal relationships. Now, he seems to be perpetually bouncing from job to job within the industry. Meanwhile, I've maintained a relationship with my former in-laws after the divorce. They've been considerate, allowing me to live peacefully. Their support was crucial for me to move on and start anew after ending my relationship with Galton. Following the divorce, I struggled with photographing children, finding it painful. My in-laws, despite being betrayed by their son, strived to present a united front, supporting me. They helped me believe that my relationship with Galton wasn't everything and that I could trust again. One day, I captured a photo of them talking peacefully. I plan to feature this photo in my upcoming online exhibition as the main piece. Although they were quite shy about it, I believe they'll be happy with it in the end. Michael's baby turned 1 month old, and a celebration was planned. I was invited to Regina's parents' home.
How adorable! Just like an angel.
The moment I reached out to the baby's tiny fist, Regina shouted,
"Don't touch the baby if you're a stranger."
I withdrew my hand in surprise and protested.
"I'm Michael's mother. I'm the grandma of this child."
"So?" Regina smiled mischievously.
"To me, you're a stranger. You're just someone unnecessary once I've gotten the congratulatory money."
"That's terrible."
"You're stingy, just like your deli. It doesn't seem like we'll need anything from you in the future. So, this is where our relationship ends. Don't show your gloomy face around us again. We don't want your poverty rubbing off on our family."
I was momentarily taken aback, but quickly responded with a smile.
"All right then."
Leaving me at the entrance, Regina went back inside. In my heart, I declared war. If that's the attitude you're going to take, I have my plans too. You'll regret this later. I am Margaret, a 55-year-old housewife. Shortly after my eldest son, Michael, started elementary school, I lost my husband. Determined to support Michael through college, I decided to work harder. I quit my part-time job and, using the money my husband had left, started a small delicatessen. Thanks to working tirelessly every day, the deli gradually became successful. And I was able to send Michael to college. When Michael was a child, I was too busy with daily life. We hardly ever had the luxury to go to theme parks or play in the park on weekends like other families. I felt guilty for not being able to give him more attention, fearing I was a failure as a parent. But Michael grew up to be a compassionate person, which relieved me. Michael, who landed a job at a big company, moved out to live on his own. Though he lived in the city, he would come to visit with a bright smile during long weekends. When he got used to his job, he called me one day saying, "There's someone I want you to meet," which excited me. However, I felt anxious as well as happy when Michael brought the young lady home. She was the daughter of the well-known Tucker Industries. I was nervous, thinking it was about making Michael a successor. But it turned out her cousin was set to take over and was already the vice president. Michael's wife, Regina, graduated from a university that only heiresses attend and is currently practicing to be a housewife at her parents' home. "Nice to meet you. Let's get along well, Margaret." The first time we met, she grabbed my hand and vigorously shook it. I could tell she was well-bred from her dining manners and behavior. But her unrestrained and flashy personality made me feel we wouldn't get along. But since Michael chose her, I wanted to get along well. I decided to make an effort to become closer. However, my feelings were quickly trampled upon after they got married. Regina was chatty and had a bright personality. That sounds nice, but her conversations revolved around neighborhood gossip, celebrity news, and speaking ill of acquaintances. The biggest issue was the timing of her visits. She would show up unannounced right when I got back from work and started preparing dinner. Naturally, I ended up inviting her to eat. I don't have any morning sickness at all. I can eat anything. Beer's okay too.
You shouldn't drink alcohol if you're pregnant. Really? Is that so?
Regina's surprised look made me anxious. When she told me she was pregnant, I was as happy as if it were my own news. But Regina seemed to lack awareness as a pregnant woman or had little prior knowledge. And despite claiming she could eat anything, her likes and dislikes were strong. She disliked fish for being too fishy and would only eat meat from certain brands. For dessert after dinner, she wanted expensive fruits like Japanese shine muscat grapes and muskmelons. Moreover, she had a habit of rating the meals after eating.
65 points. Not great.
93 points. Could use more spice.
Today is 100 points. Amazing, you passed. Congratulations.
I forced a smile at her full-faced grin. "Regina, why do you rate every meal?" she said with a broad smile. "I'm doing you a favor, practicing. If you can't satisfy your daughter-in-law, your deli might as well shut down."
"I've been running it for 20 years in downtown, you know."
My sarcasm didn't land.
"It only takes a moment to go under. I wouldn't want to take care of an unemployed Margaret. So, you better work hard."
I'm only 55, yet she treats me like an old lady. Though she seems well-meaning, her constant superior attitude and offensive remarks are infuriating. Having these exchanges 4 or 5 times a week is exhausting. And using her pregnancy as an excuse, she won't even clear the table after eating, lounging on the sofa with her phone instead. She wouldn't budge, so when I tried to relax with a beer and TV, she complained.
"Margaret, that's terrible. Drinking in front of me, is this harassment? Go to your room. I just want to enjoy a drink while watching TV dramas."
"Why don't you watch on your mobile phone? You're so inconsiderate." "I want to watch on a big screen, not a tiny one. And why do I have to take this from my daughter-in-law?" When my irritation reached its peak, Regina packs up Michael's share of dinner, smiles, and leaves. Exhausted, I bathe early and head to bed. Casually asking how they manage weekend dinners, she unabashedly says they use delivery, deli items, or ready meals.
"I'm not good at housework. But I want Michael to eat delicious meals. It would really help if Margaret could prepare weekend dinners too."
I ignored her audacious request. "I'm happy Regina comes to visit, but I'm also tired from work. Maybe just once a week would be better." When I couldn't take it anymore and complained to Michael over the phone, this was his response.
Regina's morning sickness is really bad, and she can't do anything at home. I'm swamped with overtime, so I can only help out with the chores on weekends. She's lying down all the time at your place, right?
Having Mom watch over Regina makes me feel relieved. It's her first pregnancy, so she's probably anxious. Please overlook her rudeness.
All right, I understand.
It seems Regina plays the role of a frail pregnant woman in front of Michael. I strongly wanted to show him how she lies on the sofa, laughing while watching videos. But doing so would disappoint kind-hearted Michael and make him feel guilty towards me. Regina is taking advantage of me, knowing I wouldn't do such a thing. That part again irritates me. Though I'm not fond of Regina, I'm looking forward to meeting my grandchild and want to maintain a good relationship with Michael as before. So, I decided not to meddle too much and warmly watch over Michael and his family. I shouldn't impose my opinions on naming the grandchild or insist on living together because he's the eldest son. Instead, when Regina asked, I helped with buying baby supplies, accompanied her to prenatal checkups, and even to church to pray, serving as a dedicated bag carrier. As a grandma, I was eager to help in any way possible. But Regina's attitude grew increasingly overbearing. Lately, she even orders large furniture to be delivered to our home, right in front of me.
Margaret, what do you think of this? It's expensive.
Shall I buy it for you? Offering to buy it was my downfall. After that, she started asking for expensive baby items one after another.
Imported items are more stylish, right? It would be really nice to have a matching set. Regina, why not rent items that are only used for a short period? There are affordable and durable domestic brands too.
I couldn't help but suggest, and Regina glared at me sharply.
Margaret, don't you want to give your grandchild the best?
There's no end to luxury. So, you just don't want to spend the money, huh? Oh, how dreadful. Dad or Mom would easily shell out $100,000. I thought, why not ask your dad or mom then? But it seems she has no intention of relying on her parents.
Margaret, you can't take your money to the grave. Let's spend it generously without being stingy.
Her words were so rude that I was at a loss for words. I felt my face heat up with anger, and I almost yelled back, "Mind your own business." No, that's not right. Causing a scene would put Michael in a difficult position, which would be unfair to him. Struggling to control my anger, I tried to speak calmly. Anyway, let's use rental services for things we can. Savings have their limits.
All right, I understand.
Regina reluctantly agreed, though she seemed dissatisfied. My relief was short-lived when Michael called me in the evening.
Regina was asking Mom for various baby items? Yes, well.
Sorry. I thought she was buying them with the money I've been giving her. I was surprised when I saw the sudden increase in high-brand baby clothes and toys. I could tell Michael was confused over the phone.
Did she make you spend a lot? Should I pay you back?
No, it's fine. I was planning to buy her some things anyway. Really sorry. Regina wanted a girl, and when we found out at the hospital, she got carried away. I thought it was more than just getting carried away, but I refrained from speaking ill of Regina and stopped arguing. It's nice that it's a girl as she wanted.
Being a lady, she just has a different sense of money from us. But I don't think she means any harm. I'll tell her not to burden Mom anymore.
Please do. After hanging up, I sighed. I understand the desire to gather cute baby items. Still, it would be common sense to show a little restraint. After that, Michael must have talked to her because Regina stopped asking for expensive baby items altogether. I wished she would stop coming altogether, but Regina kept showing up as if nothing happened. Lately, she seemed to have shifted her strategy to asking for small amounts of money, thinking if not large sums, then small ones might work.
Look, I can't work because I'm pregnant, so I have no money. But I'm scared Michael will lose interest if I don't keep up appearances. It's okay for someone old like Margaret, but I'm young and want to be loved.
Of course, I had no intention of giving her a penny.
Why don't you ask Michael for more allowance? He'd listen, right?
I can't do that. It would sound like I'm blaming his salary. Regina pouted, snacking on some treats. Being a manager at a major company at 30, he earns more than most of his peers. But my dad earns more. Oh, sorry. The words "then ask your dad" almost slipped out, but I held back with all my might. Regina always carried a high-brand bag and wore well-tailored maternity wear. Wanting more despite getting a hefty allowance seemed too selfish. It's not that I think pregnant women shouldn't dress well or housewives should look shabby. But begging your mother-in-law for money is definitely wrong. Though I was upset, looking at Regina's swollen belly calmed my anger. Soon, I'll meet the baby. The thought of becoming a grandma soon tickles me. In that aspect, I'm thankful to Regina. When my sister-in-law, Chelsea, came over the weekend and I vented to her, she was outraged.
The worst daughter-in-law ever. She's taking advantage of you too much. Michael should speak up.
Do you think so? I smiled at Chelsea's indignation. But I think once the baby is born, her rude behavior towards me will get better.
It's not just maternity blues, it's her character. Don't get your hopes up.
Maybe. But I get along with Michael, and I don't want to ruin their marriage. Chelsea sighed in frustration.
Don't keep it all to yourself. I'm here to listen to your complaints anytime.
Thanks, Chelsea. I smiled at Chelsea. For now, let's just pray that the baby is born safely. Eventually, Regina gave birth without any issues. I wanted to meet the baby, but since she went straight to her parents' house after being discharged, I decided to wait until Regina was feeling better. Michael, stopping by Regina's parents' house after work, sends me pictures of the baby daily. I can only imagine how adorable the baby must be in person, and my anticipation grows. When the baby was about a month old, Michael contacted me. Regina wants to have a baby reveal party. A reveal party? Yeah, at her parents' house, inviting relatives. Can we invite our side too? Thomas and the others are on board. That sounds good. Why not invite the same group as we did for the wedding? I'll do that. Then, I'll start reaching out. My relatives all live in the same state. They love events, so they'd be happy to come. As expected, when I informed them of the date, they all wanted to come. On the day, I arrived a bit early with a gift for the baby, intending to greet Regina's parents first. I rang the doorbell of the grand house, surrounded by a high fence, and a mature woman's voice responded. The parents were often away for work, so a housekeeper was always there. The person who came to the door must have been her. As I reached the grand entrance along the slope, Regina, in a floral dress, greeted me at the foyer, holding the innocent baby in her arms. Dad and Mom got called into sudden work, so they're not back yet. Busy even on a Sunday. I greeted and was about to enter when Regina coldly asked, "The gift for the baby?"
Oh, yes, here.
Handing the baby to the waiting housekeeper, Regina watched as I searched my bag. She snatched the envelope as I pulled it out and opened it right there. Are we checking gifts in front of everyone? Ignoring my surprise, Regina pulled out the contents and frowned in displeasure.
$1,000? That's too little. I thought that was the going rate. At least $50,000 should be in there.
Well, can't expect much from poor people. As Regina put the gift back into the envelope, the housekeeper stood behind her, holding the baby, who yawned adorably. Drawn by the baby's cuteness, I approached the housekeeper.
How adorable, just like an angel.
As I reached out to the baby's tightly clenched little fist.
Don't touch the baby if you're a stranger.
Startled by the sudden shout, I pulled my hand back. As the baby began to cry, Regina commanded the housekeeper.
Take him to his room, now.
Yes. After the housekeeper took the baby away, I protested to Regina.
I am Michael's mother. I'm the grandma of this child.
So? Regina smirked mischievously.
To me, you're a stranger. You're just someone unnecessary once I've gotten the congratulatory money. That's terrible. You're stingy, just like your deli. It doesn't seem like we'll need anything from you in the future. So, this is where our relationship ends.
She fluttered her hand, shooing me away.
Thanks for your efforts. You can go home now. Don't ever show me that gloomy face again. We don't want your poverty rubbing off on our family.
I was momentarily shocked, but quickly responded with a smile.
All right then.
Leaving me at the entrance, Regina went back inside. Her words kept swirling in my head. This was the first time in my life I had been subjected to such a terrible humiliation. Why do I have to be spoken to like this by my daughter-in-law? Clenching my fists as if my bones would crush, I declared war in my heart. If that's the attitude you're going to take, I have my plans too. You'll regret this later. When I opened the front door, my relatives were crossing the garden, coming my way.
Huh? Margaret, are you leaving already?
Regina, who came out to greet them, smiled at the puzzled relatives.
Margaret has some errands to run.
Dinner is about to arrive. You could have stayed and eaten with us. She's in a hurry.
Welcome, everyone. It seems Michael and his parents will be a little while longer. Please make yourselves comfortable in the meantime.
Regina ushered the relatives inside, closed the front door, and immediately locked it. Regina, who is good at putting on a facade, is popular with our relatives. At my husband's anniversary memorial, she went around pouring drinks for the older men, introducing herself. Despite being beautiful and wealthy, her cheerful and friendly demeanor left a very good impression. So, no one doubted Regina's words this time. I decided to resort to my last option. I headed somewhere. 2 hours later, I pressed Regina's family's doorbell again. In front of the relatives, Regina, who reluctantly let me in, whispered to me irritably.
Why did you come back?
I forgot something important.
Huh? Oh, you brought the rest of the congratulatory money. Such a small amount was indeed embarrassing.
Passing by the smirking Regina, I proceeded down the hall filled with lively voices. Opening the door, I found a spacious dining room where both families were gathered around a huge table. Although Regina's parents and Michael were nowhere to be seen, the table was laden with appetizers, and the relatives were happily sharing beer and wine.
Margaret, you came back. Come over here. We have bourbon and cocktails too. Why not have the housekeeper bring some?
I smiled at the beckoning relatives. Thank you, Trevor. But before that, I have something I'd like to reveal too.
Oh, what's that? A surprise gift?
To Regina's nonchalant question, I responded just as pleasantly.
Yes, a surprise. Now, everyone, please listen.
Clapping my hands, I silenced the chatter of the relatives and opened the voice recording app on my mobile phone, pressing play.
Don't touch the baby if you're a stranger.
Regina's shout echoed in the suddenly quiet room.
Is that Regina's voice?
The room buzzed with confusion.
Once you've given the congratulatory money, you're unnecessary. With your stingy delicatessen, we won't need anything from you in the future. So, this is where our relationship ends. Don't ever show that gloomy face again. We don't want your poverty rubbing off on our family.
No matter how many times I hear it, it's a terrible line. It seems I'm not the only one who thinks so, as the women in the family began to criticize Regina.
Even if a daughter-in-law and mother-in-law are traditionally at odds, this is too much. Margaret raised Michael alone while running the delicatessen, enduring so much. To belittle her like this is unforgivable. What's this? Just because her parents are wealthy, she acts so haughty. Such a nasty daughter-in-law.
Not just my relatives, but even Regina's family expressed their anger.
To say such things to your mother-in-law is unbelievable.
We're so sorry for our Regina. This is embarrassing for us too.
Being spoiled as a lady is one thing, but doesn't she know the difference between right and wrong? At her age, such lack of manners.
Faced with the cold stares of the relatives, Regina showed panic. Her cheeks twitching, she hurriedly tried to smooth things over.
Stop joking around, Margaret. Oh, I get it. You're jealous because Michael always defends me, so you made this up.
Regina covered her face with her hands and started to fake cry. I've tried so hard to get along with Margaret, and this is how she treats me? That's cruel. The women all had faces of disbelief. However, the men were easily deceived, looking confused and at each other.
Come on, that's too harsh. Yeah, ganging up on her. Poor thing, she started crying. Margaret, what's the meaning of this? Are you acting spitefully because Michael chose Regina? It's always the mother-in-law bullying the daughter-in-law, isn't it? Everyone knows Regina is a good girl. Don't pull such pranks, Margaret.
The men quickly sided with Regina, who must have been inwardly mocking them. Then the women exploded in anger.
Good girl? When we had a gathering at Margaret's, she refused to help in the kitchen, escaping to the dining area. Ignored calls for help, flirting with the men all the time. Right. When we were supposed to bring dishes for the meal, she lied about injuring her hand and brought store-bought items, then had the audacity to claim hers was the best.
Men are really weak against this type of girl. No eye for character. The dining room turned into a battleground of men versus women, mixing my relatives with Regina's. The once lively dining room was now filled with a tense atmosphere. As the housekeeper, flustered, brought in more beer, the doorbell rang. Chelsea entered the dining room, guided by the housekeeper. With a thick, bulging envelope of congratulatory money in her hand, catching Regina's eye. Chelsea, welcome, and thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. Here's the congratulatory money. Oh!
Chelsea deliberately let the envelope slip from her hand, scattering its contents across the table.
Oh dear, I forgot to seal it. Sorry about that. Huh? Who's that in the picture with Regina?
A relative picked up a photo, murmuring suspiciously. Regina turned around in shock. But before Regina could collect the photos, several relatives grabbed them, exclaiming in unison.
Whoa! This looks like evidence of an affair.
It was a sight one would want to look away from. Photos captured Regina being hugged by an unknown man, kissing as she got out of a car, and entering a hotel together. As the relatives were shocked, Regina hurriedly tried to explain.
It's not what it looks like. He's just an acquaintance. He loves physical affection. And the hotel, he said he felt sick, so I accompanied him inside.
Her excuses sounded incredibly feeble. Even the men who had defended Regina were now giving her cold looks. As if delivering the final blow, Chelsea turned on a voice recorder. And a conversation between Regina and the man played out.
Can't wait for my child to be born.
It's a hassle if your wife finds out, so let's just say it's Michael's and mine, okay?
Shame, but we have no choice.
He's so dumb, thinking you're just a friend.
Hilarious.
We can get away with it since Michael and I have the same blood type from our college days.
What if the child looks just like you? We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Their laughter ended the recording. Regina, pale-faced, turned to Chelsea.
Why do you have this? Oh, didn't I mention? I run a private investigation firm.
Chelsea smiled slightly.
Margaret asked me to look into you because of your reckless spending and suspicious behavior. And, as expected, it turned out to be an affair. I intended to keep this to myself to avoid ruining the marriage. But seeing no change in your attitude, Regina, I thought you deserved a punishment.
Regina glared at me with a venomous look.
So, it was your doing.
As Regina lunged at me, Chelsea quickly grabbed her arm, stepping in between. Shaking off Chelsea's grip, Regina threatened in a low voice.
Remember, keep quiet about this to Michael. It would be pitiful for the child to be abandoned by Dad right after being born. Everyone agrees, right?
Her self-serving logic was astounding, but Regina desperately sought agreement from the relatives.
Michael loves children, and if he remains unaware, he'll adore this child. So, let's keep this a secret, okay?
A deep, resonant voice froze everyone, including Regina and me. Looking towards the source, we saw Michael standing at the doorway. It seemed he had entered the house with Chelsea and had been eavesdropping from the hallway.
Michael.
Approaching Regina, Michael looked at her with disdain and angrily retorted.
We used to go out for drinks, the four of us, including his wife, before Regina got pregnant. I never imagined you two were meeting alone afterwards. Laughing at me, both of you. I'm sorry. Please, don't talk about divorce.
Regina pleaded with puppy eyes, but Michael shouted back.
Of course we're getting a divorce. Insulting not just me but also my mom, unforgivable.
Michael and Regina glared at each other for a while, but eventually, Regina was the first to back down.
Fine, we can get a divorce. But I'm keeping custody of the child. I've always wanted a child.
Even at this point, she insisted as if she had done nothing wrong. What an audacious woman. The relatives watched the exchange between Regina and Michael, tense. With clasped hands and a dreamy expression, Regina began to speak.
I think the child will look like me and be incredibly beautiful. Then I'll dress her in stylish clothes and take her everywhere. A young and beautiful me with a cute daughter. We could become famous as a beautiful mother-daughter duo. She's definitely going to be a model or actress someday. I'm so glad I had a daughter. Hey, children aren't accessories. Are you raising her just to show off? That's pitiful for the child. Being a single mother is tough. Do you understand what it entails to work and raise a child?
At my words, Regina laughed in a high-pitched tone.
Who do you think I am? I'm the daughter of Tucker Industries. Unlike your delicatessen, I have endless money. My dad and mom will help, and with housekeepers and babysitters, I won't have to care for the child. I can live leisurely without working hard.
After boasting, she twisted her lips into a sneer.
Well, being from a single-parent family might be disadvantageous for school applications. So I plan to remarry someone suitable. Next time, not a company employee but a handsome CEO of an IT company. Such a man would let me have more freedom to play.
Seems like it, Mr. Tucker. Chelsea called out, and Regina's parents appeared from the back door. Shocked and speechless, Chelsea explained to us.
Actually, the Tuckers asked me to investigate Regina's behavior. They pretended to go to work today but stayed hidden, wanting to expose Regina's true nature. She had always worn a mask in front of her parents.
The Tucker couple stepped into the center of the room and bowed deeply to us.
Everyone, we apologize for the disturbance Regina has caused. We don't know how to make it up to Michael and Margaret.
With a pained expression, they looked at Regina. Regina, now as pale as paper, was trembling. Thomas, Regina's father, sighed deeply and lamented in a low voice.
To betray Margaret like this. I'm ashamed of my own daughter.
But...
Regina suddenly looked up at her father. Moving closer with tearful eyes and a sweet tone, starting to make excuses.
I was bullied by Margaret. There's no proof, no images or recordings, but she said many mean things to me. It hurt, so I retaliated. Dad, you believe me, right?
As I was about to argue, Regina's mother, Selena, sharply said,
Lies! Margaret isn't like that.
Selena turned to me and declared,
As a fan of that shop, I can't accept what you've said. Take it back. What?
Regina, wide-eyed, listened as Thomas explained.
Selena and I are regulars at Margaret's Delicatessen. We often rely on it for business trips and dining with clients. For mom friends' home parties, we order delivery. That way, I only need to make desserts. The dishes with organic vegetables are famous for being healthy and delicious. I've known Margaret since before Michael's marriage, haven't I mentioned it before? Eh? Really?
Regina, sweating profusely. She had likely been tuning it out. Selena, with a look of disgust, turned to Regina and said,
We've overlooked your whims to some extent until now, but this time, your behavior towards Michael and Margaret is inexcusable.
Exactly.
Casually lying, demeaning others. After having an affair, you plan to raise another man's child as Michael's. That's the lowest of the low.
Thomas glared at Regina with icy eyes and firmly declared,
We're disowning you as of today. What? That's troubling. What am I supposed to do starting tomorrow?
Figure it out yourself.
You're 30, aren't you?
How long do you plan to depend on others?
Why don't you remarry him?
He's the real dad, right?
That's impossible. He said he wouldn't leave his wife.
Oh no. I don't want to work.
Regina let out a pitiful cry.
Michael, I'm sorry. It was all my fault.
Regina started to deeply apologize at mine and Michael's feet.
Margaret, I'm sorry for everything. Please forgive me.
Mom, let's go home. We should get our congratulatory money back. There's no obligation to pay it to a complete stranger.
Yes, let's do that.
I'll take mine back too. Me too, I've lost my appetite.
Michael took the envelope from the black tray, and the other relatives followed suit.
If it's not Michael's child, there's no need for a gift. Right, it's ridiculous.
I thought it was a chance to make some pocket money by exploiting the baby.
As Regina crumbled to her knees, the relatives, without a glance in her direction, left the meal and the celebration came to a miserable end. The room was left with scattered dishes, half-drunk beverages, and meals, marking the desolate conclusion of the reveal party. Unwilling to work, Regina cried and refused the divorce but was persuaded by the Tuckers to reluctantly sign. The compensation for the divorce lawsuit was fronted by her parents. Afterward, Regina was kicked out of her home. She moved into an apartment with moving and initial costs borrowed from her parents, starting to live alone. The Tuckers decided they couldn't leave the baby with Regina and chose to raise it themselves. They also demanded child support and recognition from the baby's father, who complied. Regina, who had lived a life of leisure, must be struggling with her first part-time job. After all, she has to pay back her parents for the moving expenses and compensation, in addition to her living costs. Regina, now deprived of the luxury to dress fashionably or enjoy leisure activities, seems to be working desperately every day, her hair disheveled. Though Michael and I have cut ties with Regina, our relationship with the Tucker couple continues. After the reveal party, the parents came to me with an apology gift. We were wrong in how we raised her. We're terribly sorry to both Michael and Margaret. Their tearful apologies eased some of my unresolved anger. Thankfully, they continue to frequent the delicatessen, which has thrived on word of mouth and has more customers now than it did 10 years ago. I'm currently busy preparing for the opening of a second location. Michael, too, seems to have regained his spirits and is diligently working. Both of us are living busy yet fulfilling lives. Someday, if fate allows and Michael has his own child, we plan to shower that child with endless love.
You deserve this for standing up to me, you worthless wife.
Christopher yelled and threw me into the shed. I fell and hit my back against something, groaning in pain. Meanwhile, Christopher shut the door. The shed was engulfed in darkness in an instant. I leaped towards the door and pounded on it fiercely. But it didn't open. It seemed like Christopher did something from the outside. The door felt heavy, and I was overwhelmed by a sense of despair. Was this all my fault? No, I had been aware of Christopher's flamboyant affairs even when we were dating, but I turned a blind eye. Because I loved him. But everyone has their breaking point. Today was mine. When I confronted Christopher about his cheating, he flipped out, leading to this mess. I won't forgive him. No matter what, I will get out of here and make Christopher realize his mistake. But I can't think of a plan. As I'm overwhelmed by my raging emotions, I hear the door open. My name is Mariah. I'm a 44-year-old housewife. I live with my husband Christopher, who is 5 years younger than me. We don't have kids because Christopher didn't want any. I had always dreamt of becoming a mom, but by the time I got married, I was already 35, an age when pregnancy becomes challenging. But now, I think it's probably for the best. Christopher would have too many issues as a dad, and I can't imagine dealing with a child in my current mental state. I met Christopher 12 years ago. I was 32, and he was a youthful 27 years old. We were colleagues, and he often affectionately called me Mariah. I was immediately attracted to Christopher. He was good-looking, cheerful, and friendly. But I couldn't exactly call myself beautiful, and considering our age difference, I didn't think I stood a chance. Then, out of the blue, Christopher confessed his feelings for me. I couldn't believe it, but I was overjoyed and quickly accepted. Our relationship started smoothly. Christopher was understanding about my insecurities regarding my age and appearance.
Don't worry about that,
he said. I was happy. The reason Christopher chose me was a mystery, but as long as I believed he loved me, it felt like everything was resolved. But it was a sweet illusion. As our first anniversary approached, Christopher's true nature began to reveal itself. He always used the same excuse, I forgot my wallet, making me pay for all our date expenses. Up until then, we had been splitting the bill, so the sudden financial burden hurt. More than that, Christopher's repeated excuses for not paying made me see him as insincere. Once, I decided to beat him to it and said,
"I forgot my wallet."
before he said so. It was right after we met up. Christopher responded immediately.
"Why don't you go get it?
Your place is close, right?"
Close? I took the train here, you know that's not happening.
After a nonchalant nod, Christopher turned his back on me.
Christopher? If you don't have money, we can't go on a date, right?
Let's call it a day. With a wave, he disappeared into the crowd. All I could do was to stand there, dumbfounded. I began to feel uneasy about my relationship with Christopher. Could I ever be happy with him? Even with those doubts, I couldn't leave him. I had a relationship with only one guy before Christopher. The first relationship was during my student days, a brief 6-month affair that ended when he found someone else. As for Christopher, he was quite popular with the women at work. He knew it too, smoothly delegating his tasks to them. He hadn't tried that with me yet, but when would his feelings change? I grew increasingly timid and even more dependent on Christopher. His smile, his sweet words. I convinced myself they were privileges only for me. But Christopher never understood my desperate clinging. One day at work, I overheard him talking to another male colleague.
"I'm with Mariah, but she's the best option for now. She's older, but she pays for our dates, even gifts me watches sometimes. If I were to marry, Mariah seems like a good choice. The other two spend too much, no way."
Christopher was seeing 2 other women besides me. I secretly hired a detective to investigate him. I wanted to prove what I heard was a mistake. But the reality was harsh. One of Christopher's girlfriends was a colleague. Another worked for a client company. After much contemplation, I chose to overlook Christopher's promiscuity. He had chosen me as his partner for marriage. Perhaps it was because I catered to Christopher, never complaining about his whims. I believed that once we were married, his bad habits would disappear. But after the wedding, he started staying out blatantly. Upon investigation, it was always with women in their early to mid-30s. Christopher was irresistibly drawn to the financial security these women provide and the inferiority these women felt towards him, leading them to devote themselves completely. Christopher had a girlfriend named Carol. When she realized she'd been deceived, she came to apologize to me first.
"I'm so sorry. Christopher told me he was single." "It's okay, we're both victims here,"
I said calmly. Carol was 35. The age I was when I got married. She had been with Christopher for 2 years. For a woman, that's precious time spent on Christopher. It was even sadder knowing she had seriously considered marrying him. Carol promised to break it off with Christopher. I promised to support her if anything happened. That day, Christopher seemed restless. He had a 2-night, 3-day company trip to Los Angeles starting tomorrow. After he finished packing, Christopher tried to hurry back to his room. I was cleaning up after dinner when I suddenly spoke up.
"I talked to Carol."
"Who's that?" Christopher tilted his head, feigning ignorance. I spread the documents I received from the detective on the table.
"I've known for a while that you have been seeing many women." "Mariah, what are you doing?"
Christopher lost it.
"Yeah, you're right. So what? I gave those girls a good dream. I deserve something in return."
Carol was hurt. I mustn't let myself get angry alongside him. I remained calm and said,
"She believed you would marry her. So, what? You gonna divorce me, Mariah? Then maybe I'd consider." "No, forget it. She's not thoughtful enough, and there are better women out there."
"Christopher." I was shocked. I expected him to be upset, but to casually talk about divorce and compare Carol like that.
"Anyway, Mariah, you know what happens when you cross me, right?"
I was confused. Christopher was the one in the wrong. Yet, he acted as if I had broken some rules. He forcefully grabbed my arm, making me stand up, and led me outside. There it was, the shed. He stopped in front of it, flung open the door, and threw me inside.
You deserve this for standing up to me, you worthless wife.
I fell and hit my back against something, groaning in pain.
Christopher, you can't be serious.
By the time I turned around, Christopher had already shut the door. I rushed to the door in shock, but it wouldn't open. Christopher must have done something from the outside.
Reflect on this. I'm going out. Wait, Christopher. Please wait.
Being locked up here, I couldn't care less about reflection. I would get thirsty and hungry. If I can't get out of here, I'll wither away. And with Christopher leaving for a company trip tomorrow, what will become of me after 3 days of being left here? I had hoped he might let me out soon. But his footsteps faded away, and the yard fell silent. The shed had no windows. With the door shut, the inside was pitch black. A sense of vulnerability crept up from my feet. Had I really done something so terrible? I knew Christopher could be cold-hearted, but I had never imagined it would go this far. Maybe he doesn't care what happens to me. Perhaps he'll actually leave me locked up here while he's on his trip. Then, it happened.
Mariah.
A soft voice called out. I was startled. The door had opened. There stood Carol, Christopher's ex-girlfriend. She had come to see me. She rang the doorbell but got no response, and noticing noise from the yard, she came to check.
I saw Christopher locking you in here. It's terrible.
It's okay. I chose to be with him, knowing what kind of man he is. This is on me, I said, as if convincing myself. But I'm grateful. I'm glad you were here.
I dated Christopher too, indirectly taking you for granted.
That's not true. I slowly shook my head. You didn't know anything. You truly liked Christopher. That's all, right? Just like me.
Mariah.
Carol looked like she was about to cry, quickly wiping her tears with the back of her hand. I told her, Carol, I need your help. Will you stand up to Christopher with me? Carol looked at me in surprise.
Stand up to Christopher? What are you planning?
I'll explain it now. After I shared the plan, Carol was shocked but nodded in agreement. Christopher had apparently gone to a friend's house. Once we made sure he wasn't home, Carol and I went back inside the house. The plan would begin with Christopher's return. The day I was locked into the shed and the 3 days of the company trip passed. Christopher came out to the yard. She must be okay, right? He mumbled in front of the shed. Realizing the severity of his actions, he was probably feeling guilty. But it was too late. Hey, Mariah. The reflection time's over. You can come out now. Christopher opened the shed door. The moment he did, his expression froze. He rubbed his eyes as if not trusting what he saw, and looked inside the shed again. The result didn't change. Who are you? In front of Christopher, a woman who was not me sat huddled. In his mind, I had been locked in there the whole time. It was impossible for the clothes or hairstyle to change midway. The woman looked up. Christopher's face contorted even more. Carol, what are you doing? Where's Mariah? I'm right here. I emerged from where I was hiding. At the same time, Carol stood up. Surrounded by the two of us, Christopher looked back and forth between me and Carol, flustered.
What are you two up to?
Relax. We're not going to lock you up.
Just calm down and listen to what Carol has to say.
Carol's story?
Christopher frowned, and Carol seemed to recoil. But she didn't run away. She opened her mouth and blurted it out.
Christopher, you've been deceiving me. I'm going to demand compensation. What?
Christopher seemed about to explode with anger, but somehow held back. After watching his reaction, I spoke up. Christopher, let's get a divorce.
And of course, you'll be paying compensation to me as well. You too. What's with both of you? You are giving women dreams, right? In return, you accepted their devotion. But it's time to come back to reality.
Yes, this was our decision. To impose a financial penalty on Christopher. But it wasn't over yet. Christopher's mobile phone rang.
Hello? Dad? It's a bad time. I'll call back later. Apologize to Mariah now? Dad, you can't be serious.
I've told Polly and the others everything.
Christopher's face turned pale. Then, things moved quickly. Raphael, Polly, rushed over from his family home and fiercely reprimanded his son. I had copied all the documents I received from the detective and sent them to Polly.
I've heard it all from Mariah. What kind of person are you? This is the end of our relationship with you. No, Dad.
Christopher looked at Polly with tears in his eyes. But Polly's resolve was firm. He ordered Christopher to pay all the compensation to the two women himself.
Don't be ridiculous, Dad. Please don't say that.
Christopher clung to Polly.
Please, I beg you. I'll change. So, can you at least pay half? Be quiet. You're embarrassing. Mariah, I'm sorry. I never thought my son could be this terrible. I'll make sure he has nothing to do with you anymore.
Please don't worry about it, Polly.
Christopher faced a substantial compensation claim from the lawyer hired by me and Carol and was forced to pay a significant amount. Christopher's misdeeds spread quickly among both families. They whispered about disowning him, and eventually, the gossip reached his workplace.
I've been fired from my job.
I see. I remained calm and collected. Christopher, with a trembling voice and downcast eyes.
I can't pay the compensation.
He kept repeating.
How can I pay it without a job? I also have been cut off from relatives. There's nothing I can do.
That's how I felt, Christopher, when you locked me up.
Trapped in the dark, unable to go anywhere or do anything. That feeling of being left in the dark with no way out. Now, Christopher was tasting that same despair. There was another fact Christopher didn't know. Carol was pregnant. I was shocked, but even more, I was happy for her.
Congratulations. I know it'll be tough as a single mom, but you can do it.
Thank you.
I'll try my best to be a good mom.
We didn't want Christopher's sins to burden the child. We wished for the child to grow up strong and straightforward, like Carol. I also thought if I hadn't given up on having a child with Christopher, maybe I'd have had another family member. I asked Carol,
please let me meet the child when they are born.
And saw her off. A child. I intensely wished for one too. Eventually, I decided to adopt once my life was stable. Christopher was gone, so I stayed in the house, and there were part-time jobs available at the nearby grocery store or supermarket. All right, time to gear up. Life felt more vibrant with a purpose. I made friends at work, and the joy of mutual support was new to me, as Christopher had never helped me. Then, here came the long-awaited adoption. The process and preparations were extensive, but I didn't mind. I met her. Not related by blood, but undoubtedly my child. I knew at the moment I saw her. This is the child. Violet recognized me as her mom. Innocently.
Mom.
She called me. Christopher, you wouldn't understand, but the joy of having a child is immense. This is my revenge. Walking my path with my newfound Violet. Not seeking affirmation from Christopher's sweet nothings. To recognize and believe in myself. As a person, as a mom. You always seem so happy these days, said David, my boss. David was 39. Coincidentally the same age as Christopher. But unlike Christopher, David was unpretentious, earnest, and a bit inept. They were entirely different. Perhaps that's why I could open up to a man of Christopher's age.
Mariah, you adapted to work quickly, you're reliable.
It's all thanks to your guidance, David, I said with a laugh. David, for some reason, blushed and looked away.
Mariah, do you have plans for your next day off?
That day, I'm going to the amusement park with Violet.
Oh, right.
Wouldn't want to intrude. What about the day after?
David, what's up?
I noticed that. David's gaze towards me was gentle. It seemed unsettled at some point, as if hiding another emotion. Now I understand. It was probably similar to the feelings I once had for Christopher. David took a deep breath and blurted out,
Mariah, would you go out with me?
And so, David became my partner. At first, Violet was wary, but she warmed up to him after a few meetings. One day, while enjoying afternoon tea with Violet at home, the doorbell rang. Violet cheerfully replied,
Coming,
and ran to the door. Then returned with a pleased look.
It's someone you know, Mom.
Who?
A tall man.
Her words alarmed me. There was only one person that came to mind. I told Violet firmly,
Don't come out.
A dangerous person? Okay. Violet sensed my tension and looked worriedly at me.
It's okay. Mom won't lose.
I patted Violet's head and went to the door. As expected, it was him.
Who's that kid?
His first words weren't even a greeting. Apparently, it was Christopher.
What do you want?
I asked.
I need money, Mariah.
You can see, right? Indeed, Christopher looked terrible. He hadn't found a steady job since moving from one acquaintance's house to another. Eventually, he had nowhere to stay and ended up on the streets.
I don't have money to lend you.
Hey, Mariah. You've gotten pretty arrogant. Think you've beaten me? Life isn't about winning or losing. But Christopher wouldn't understand that. No pity. Just disgust. Christopher took a step closer.
Mariah, please. This is the last time. I won't show my face again. I'll go to another state and start over. I just need the money for that.
I sighed. His promise to disappear was welcome. But should I help this man?
Mom?
Then, I heard Violet's voice and footsteps. I turned around in a panic.
Don't come here!
I told Violet, but she didn't stop.
Don't trouble Mom. If it's money you need, I'll give it to you.
With that, Violet pressed $1 into Christopher's hand. Christopher stood there, stunned, then collapsed and started crying. A child's innocence. It was the happiness Christopher had once rejected. Violet will start elementary school next year, so we went to look for a school bag. David came along. As the three of us entered the store.
What a lovely family,
the store manager remarked. Violet beamed proudly, and David and I blushed.
Mom, I like this color.
Let's see. Violet picked an orange bag. It would suit her lively personality well. Let's consider this a gift from me.
Oh, you shouldn't.
I attempted to counter David's impromptu gesture.
I want to give it from me.
Then, I'll consider this as a gift from you too.
Violet chimed in cheerfully. David and I looked at each other and nodded in agreement. Sounds good. Yes, let's do that. So we split the cost and bought the new bag together. Being so delighted, Violet didn't let go of the bag all day, even holding it while sleeping. Meanwhile, David approached me with a certain proposal. About the venue.
I don't need a wedding. I didn't have one with my previous husband, and I'm past the age for wedding dresses.
That's not true. I want to see you in a wedding dress, Mariah.
David insisted. I recalled Christopher, who begrudged even a wedding ring, let alone wedding expenses. David was different. He proposed with a ring. Now, we're saving for the wedding.
You want to see Mom in a dress, right?
Yes. David had skillfully brought Violet to his side. I could only surrender with a smile. In preparation for the wedding, I embarked on a diet. All the effort paid off when I could wear the dress of my dreams, a moment of immense joy. I couldn't thank David enough for suggesting the wedding. During the ceremony, an emotional David started crying, causing a stir among friends and colleagues. I spent most of the time calming him down, but the ceremony was memorable and fantastic. Afterward, I sold the house I lived in with Christopher. It held memories, but they were all tainted with Christopher's lies. David's apartment was small, but it felt right for our fresh start. The wedding photo took center stage in our new home. David and I smiled awkwardly at the camera. Violet started elementary school. Her bright personality helped her fit in right away. She'd come home and share stories about her friends from school.
I came first in the race. That's amazing. Just like David and me.
Violet blushed, and so did David. I'm profoundly grateful for meeting these two and becoming a family. My past life revolved around pleasing and depending on Christopher. It was my life, yet it felt like it was lived for Christopher. Now, I'm walking a life for myself. Not just for me, but for David and Violet too. Our future shines brightly.